Okay, welcome back to another edition of Something for the People. I'm your host, B Smooth, and today my illustrious guest is Daniel Heiniger, my brother. I didn't grow up with any brothers, so as I got older, I gained a whole bunch of brothers. So let's welcome my other brother.
Yeah, appreciate it, man.
Yeah, yeah, how you doing, Dan?
I'm doing all right. Living, maintaining, climbing, day to day.
All right, so usually we just start off from the beginning. So let's start off, where were you born, about family life. Let's get into that.
Oh, you want my quick recap? Okay. So, I was born in the western suburbs of Chicago in Downers Grove, and so I lived in my little isolated white bubble out there, and I had a conservative upbringing. Um, and living in my bubble, there was very few things that I was exposed to. And then my undergrad happened. Went to College of DuPage in Glen Ellen for associates there. Met some outstanding professors and human beings over there, some of which I'm still friends with to today, 14 years later. And I went from there, and I just kind of got exposed to the world around me, through a lot of volunteer work and some jobs I had. I kind of fell into the world of youth development and youth work that I'm in now. Total different track from where I started, though. I went into my undergrad wanting to be in business. I had a girlfriend at the time who had a family rib shack, and I loved of the yeah, no, man, the food, oh my goodness, homemade soul food, ribs on ribs on ribs, man, it was great. So no, I just kind of fell into it. I think combination of too much television and certain people I met along the way. I actually was full force going into the FBI initially. Once I found out that I am terrible at math and a business degree wasn't going to suit me, I got fascinated with human behavior, and explaining people, actions, behavior. So I kind of went on that path, but everything I did along the way, I was a high school football coach for 4 years, where I went Downers Grove South. I was a personal caregiver for a couple families for their children with autism. So I was a one-on-one caregiver doing, phonics and sign language and socializing them and things, and that was amazing. I worked at Hesed House in Aurora, which is a homeless shelter. So I was volunteering there a couple days, and then I got through another organization called Bryan House out in Aurora, and they were kind of like a halfway house helping refugees settle into the States with free housing, resources, and everything. So I found myself working with a lot of, under-resourced and marginalized groups of people. And I just fell in love with that process. So I fell in love with, just being there, providing support for people. And I learned so much, from the family of refugees was from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And that was amazing. I still stay in touch with a few of them. But just the idea of being with young people in need, um, even as a coach, I looked like I was still in high school years ago. So the
You
kids,
sound like you're in high school now, man. You're the youngest looking guy I know.
yeah, I mean, I looked like I was like a sophomore in high school as a coach at like 19, 20 years old. I had to prove that I was a coach with my shirt and stuff to get on the field sometimes with security. But, I think it was, that I looked young and I had a different approach to, coaching that the kids kind of opened up to me about stuff. So my first week in summer camp on the job as a coach, I had a kid come up to me and he said that he wanted to kill himself. And that just kind of opened up my mind to even these kids out in the burbs, just everything that they're sorting through day to day with mental health and the lack of resources. So even though my mind was on criminology and being a behavioral analyst and stuff with the FBI. Little did I know I was going to go down a whole nother path working with youth in the city. Oh, little by little, my internship and my grad school, they placed me with a nonprofit organization, and I stayed there for over 7 years. You're familiar with them, and that just opened up my whole world, and it became just my identity, and it became something that fulfilled my life, and I happen to be kind of good at it, and so that's where I'm at. Same world.
Well, let's take it back there. Like, tell me about growing up in Downers Grove.
Talk about Downers Grove? Yeah. Okay. Well, I got I have great parents. Always supported me and the best way they knew. And growing up, my social skills were lacking. I was the third of 6 kids, so we had a big family of 8. I was blessed to have both my parents in my life, and they're still in my life. So we had all the basics covered. My dad was a hard worker. He worked every day. When he got home, he worked again in the garage. He restored classic cars and things. And my mom is just an outstanding human being, very generous, really hospitable. Never believed any of my friends that they weren't, thirsty or hungry. So I just told them to accept what she offered, and I'll let the dog eat it, or I'll hide it and eat it later, whatever. So, I learned a lot from my parents, and my grandfather was a big role model to me, my father's father.
Yeah, he was like a big influence on you.
You say again?
You talk about your relationship with your grandfather, because I know you always talk about how much he was a big influence he was on your life.
Oh, I mentioned him before, huh?
Conversations we've had before.
Man, you know what? Even in school, I wrote a report on my personal hero, and that was my grandfather. He was just this really humble, down-to-earth man, large in stature, gentle as a lamb, but his life story and what he went through, and he provided at 11, 12 years old for his big family. I think he had 7 siblings, and his father passed, so he did everything he could to support his mother and his siblings, even his older siblings. But just how he was as a person, he was just loving towards everybody, anyone he met, and real chivalrous man. I never saw my grandmother open up a car door to the house with him around. She would actually wait with her hands, folded in front of a door, and he would run up and open it for her, and he was a man of God. He was he had his beliefs and his values that he lived by, and anything, he wouldn't compromise anything with his values and beliefs. But he would just accept people. He would love on them. He would share his faith with them, and just bring a beam of light wherever he went. And years after he passed 7 years ago in 2012. Almost 8 years now, and my grandmother had people calling for years after he passed. This one chance encounter they had with him, they made sure she knew the impact that he had on their life. So he wasn't someone who sat me down and said, "This is what you got to do." He just did it, and I saw him do it and wanted to be him.
Great. Because I know you always talk about, like, this is about heroes, whatever. You always mention your grandfather, and I wanted to. Okay, so what was your relationship like? Because I only have one sibling, so what is it like having like 5 other siblings? And being
5 other siblings, man. Thankfully, we get along. We're all about a couple years apart. My youngest sister, she's about 7 years from the next youngest. But all of us are in the Chicagoland area. I'm only the one in the city. And then I have one sister that got married and moved out to Colorado. So I got three married siblings. Two oldest each have three kids, and my sister in Colorado has one. So I love that uncle role. That's if there's a consistent joy in my life, it's the nephews and my niece. Uncle to seven keeps me busy. Most weekends I'm babysitting. So
Oh, yeah, man. Having nieces and nephews, that's a lot, man.
yeah.
All right, so tell me what it was like at, you talk about Downers Grove High School. What was it like there?
DGS. It was a good school. It was a big school. I graduated with a class of about 800 or 900 kids. We were in
Whoa.
Yeah, we were an 8A school, and I played football growing up, so Pee Wee football in the 4 years of high school, and athletics was a way to compensate for my lack of social skills. You know, I was good at football. I ran track in high school. I was conference and stuff, and it made friends for me. It spoke for me. I didn't have to do much, but perform on the field and on the track. And I was a pretty shy guy, so as much popularity as I might have had in high school, man, I would turn redder than I'd blend into a red wall if a girl looked at me or talked to me or something. Didn't know what to do with all that. I was kind of a late bloomer. But Downer South was good. I learned a lot through sports. The structure, the discipline. Um, and it was a real privilege to go back and coach. There's a lot of kids that I coached back in the day that I still stay in touch with, and it was just a good experience, to pass on knowledge and connect with people, kind of be what I needed, when I was young, when I returned the favor as a coach. But DGS, it was a good school. Got a pretty decent education there, and I even made friends with some teachers there. So it was nice. As far as like it was pretty diverse. I would say Downer South, being in a white suburb, there was I had some friends too that didn't look like me, act like me, talk like me, and that was good exposure. But it was the burbs still. There was still a lot of stuff happening. Most of the things that I experienced or saw friends experience, I was kind of naive to the structures that were set in place, and the experiences that some of my friends had. Even in found myself kind of joining in on some of the stuff. Unbeknownst to me, what it was doing to people to listen to say, oh, you're not really black because of how you talk and dress. That was said to some friends of mine, or it was it's a kind of ignorant community to a lot of stuff. But I think we all have most communities out in the burbs are lack of exposure and lack of experience produces ignorance, and that's definitely a lot that I absorbed and I was able to kind of break down and understand later in life. So
After Downers Grove, you move on to Cosby DuPage. So what is it like going to the Cosby DuPage?
College of DuPage, I used to think it was just high school with smoking breaks. There were so many kids that I went to school with in high school that ended up at College of DuPage, and it was it's a much different place now than it was. I think when I left, they built another 5 buildings and everything. But when I went to COD, College of DuPage, I had a friend from high school that went there, and he's still a good friend of mine today. But I got introduced to a lot right away at COD. I got involved in an organization through my friend Devin. And what happened was one day I was walking around campus and I see him, walking around in a suit and tie. And he's the athletic guy. I don't think I ever saw him wear that except maybe homecoming or prom or something. So I was like, what are you dressed up for? Because he was around a bunch of other guys all dressed up at the Multicultural Center. And they're like, oh, we're part of this organization. It's called SAB, Student African American Brotherhood. And we just kind of lift each other up, try and push each other, help each other, get to the next thing in life. We got a lot of resources, we kind of make sure we're all going to classes and taking the right things and so on and so forth. And Miss Julia and Miss Christina were two of the staff working at the Multicultural Center. So anyways, they're like, my friend's like, why don't you come through for one of our meetings? Just kind of see what we're all about. And I liked it. I liked the vibe. I liked the instant connection that I had with the guys there and everything. But they started talking to me and getting to know me a little bit. And I started hanging around them, at the Multicultural Center. And then all of a sudden, the discussion was kind of brought up on me kind of joining their organization. And that was all cool. But I felt like I wasn't maybe their target demographic being in SAB. White boy from the burbs. A lot of these guys are, from parts of the city and, commuting to COD as I was. But, I got to know them. We all started getting along. And I was the first member that wasn't a person of color in their national organization, SAB. It was founded by Dr. Tyrone Bledsoe in Toledo, Ohio. But they were a chapter. And actually, I ended up being a big part of that chapter. I was secretary for a year and I was VP for a year, and we transferred that chapter over to North Central College, where I transferred to. I went to a bunch of speaking engagements, and I was buddies with Dr. Bledsoe, the founder, and he always got a kick out of me being on a discussion panel for SAB at these universities and stuff that we go and speak at. And he's like, hey, man, just get ready. You're going to get some looks and you're going to get a lot of questions. He's like, this is going to be the year where I introduce the Brother to Brother initiative, trying to get brown and white involved too. And I was like, all right. And I was, my cheesy little ass was on the website too for a while, homepage. So,
diversity.
Yeah, it was they tried to get a little diversity in it, and we tried to make it work the best we could. Naperville is where I transferred to North Central College to complete my undergrad, and they weren't as welcoming to our organization there. It just kind of plays into the suburbs and their whole mindset.
Oh, so, not welcoming to diversity. I would have never thought it. but I've noticed that there are a lot of Black or even Latino organizations. They're very welcoming to diversity. So, or bringing white guys in, or bringing white girls into Black sororities. But the other way around doesn't seem to work. I don't know. Do you think that it's just ignorance, or I don't know.
Well, why some predominantly Black or brown organizations or fraternities are?
They seem more welcoming. If a white guy wanted to join, than the other way around.
And the white organization joining someone. No, I'm not going to speak for white people on that. I think it is an ignorance thing. I think it's a lack of exposure. I think there's a lot of things there, but for me, even being a part of a space that is supporting or including people from the community, it's predominantly Black or brown. I love it when I'm able to be welcomed in, you know. But it's always been something that I've had to, you know, keep in the forefront of my mind in the work that I do. You know, I tend to stand out in the organizations I'm a part of and the communities that I serve. And it's not usually just you know, ignorance or something that is plain. It's experience. You know, when I was working for a large nonprofit, I was introduced early on in my career why I didn't really receive a warm welcome. You know, I was in a school-based program, and my role was just to work with the youth that were in school during the school hours. But seeing that there was a greater need, and that most difficulties for these young men that I was working with happened after school hours and weekends. So my mindset was, you know, we got to do something more. I got to find something more when I'm not present. You know, I'm a support when I'm present, but these kids need me while I'm not there. So I started getting involved in the community. Most of my years was in South Lawndale and Little Village. It was predominantly Mexican families, Hispanic families, and you know, being a white boy that was not bilingual, you know, there's some challenges. But you know, I went to a lot of community meetings, and I was trying to get familiar with the organizations to introduce my kids to them and everything. But I remember introducing myself at it's a violence prevention coalition I started being a part of, and I remember feeling really invisible, and then I remember feeling that just this cold shoulder type of feeling from the people in the room. And out of the kindness of someone's heart that witnessed me in the situation, she invited me to her office after that meeting, and she's like, you know, I just want to get to know you. You seem like, you know, you're trying to get involved here, and I just, you know, why don't you come by my office? We'll get to know each other. So I told her, you know, quick life, you know, sequence of events that led me to what I was doing then. And she's like, well, it seems like your heart's in the right place, but just let me kind of educate you around why you might not be so well received. And it was basically just experience from the community. You know, it was a very close-knit community with a lot of resources, but they had a lot of bad experiences with outside organizations coming into the community and just using them for data collection and access to grants, and then they would just disappear. And unbeknownst to me, my organization was one of those that had done that before. So I had that reputation that I was representing, and my white male non-bilingual self was also looked at with uncertainty. So just having that in the forefront of my brain moving forward, and learning how to kind of navigate community, it changed everything for me. And it was because this one person took the time to get to know me, knew my heart was in the right place, but then educated me around my presence and what I represented there. So, you know, long answer to a question I didn't even answer. But
You answered it.
speaking from a different perspective, but you know, your question of why predominantly white organizations and stuff, you know, not as open to people of color, I don't know. And an organization like that, I don't even want to be affiliated with. So
Yeah, yeah. I think it's like you. It's just. I don't even know how to describe it. It's like I guess the human condition. We don't know other people's motives, but we wish they had better motives.
yeah, I mean, I think some groups of people have their mind made up, but that's fed through I think inaccurate information and dated knowledge and dated mindsets and very closed hearts and minds, you know, whereas I think organizations and communities, predominantly people of color, there's there's a lot of history there of oppression and exclusion and these experiences that, you know, people have gone through, and I think they're more open-minded to other people, you know, to maybe be more inclusive. But a community of people is made up of everyone that is present in that community, you know. And for me, you know, I've lived in a lot of different places in Chicago, from Little Italy to West Eldston over by Midway, Pilsen, and now Auburn Gresham. So you know, my reason for being here is you know, I want to be where my kids are at. I want to be where I serve. You know, my last role that I had was consulting with a nonprofit in Inglewood, and that was just up the street from where I'm at. You know, and I like the closeness. I like being able to relate and experience and be accessible. You know, not just over the phone, but in person.
You mentioned you spent several years working in the Little Village area. What is something about the Little Village area that people don't know about Little Village that they should know?
You know, like most communities, they're known for the negative. They're known for the violence and the drugs and um, you know, crime. And for all the years I was at Little Village, yeah, there was definitely a lot of those things happening. But definitely, what was predominant in the community was real positive. You know, I had a lot of my youth were being interviewed by different media sources and stuff over the years I was there. And I had this eighth grader that came up to me and he's like, "Look, I know we got this media person coming in tomorrow, but I'm tired of talking about all the negative. We need to start promoting what's happening in our neighborhood for real. We need to start talking about what we really need to do, what we need, and all the great things that are happening." Little Village, I mean, it was a lot of families, you know, a lot of kids on the street, a lot of strollers. You know, I was working with families when I was in the schools, and there would be, you know, two or three kids in high school at the same time, different grades. But it was just much more family oriented than what anyone would ever really, you know, want to promote in the news or things like that. So there's just this really close knit community where everybody knew everybody else. But unfortunately, you know, the gangs also divided Little Village east and west. So we had the Latin Kings and the 2-6, and that, you know, kept a lot of kids on the west side of the neighborhood, you know, going downtown even, because they had to, you know, take a bus through it. But you know, there was a lot of community, a lot of churches that were really heavy in the supporting of the families there. You know, it was I was embraced right away from day one. I mean, I remember the elementary school I was at, Little Village Academy. Miss Carmona, she was the principal at the time. She let me use her own personal office in the school so I could meet with the kids because they didn't have space. You know, it was just a whole nother um, support system, and like the kids were first. The kids were front and center on a lot of decisions that were being made. Um, all the relationships I have there with the organizations, they're mostly, you know, youth led. You know, they have a voice there. So I think that's something big that I experienced years ago that is still true today, that was unique to some of the other communities that I might have been a part of.
We both worked in nonprofits for many years now, and throughout most of that time, Rahm Emanuel was the mayor of Chicago. Now, Lori Lightfoot is the mayor. So, What do you hope for the new mayor to do as far as, youth in Chicago? As far as like her plan, what do you want her plan to be?
I have a lot of uh, hopes and expectations for our new mayor. She seems pretty down to earth, and just some of the things that I've been following her that she's been doing, I think have been pretty good. I mean, they're setting the tone for more things to come. But again, I'm not. I don't get too much into speaking my mind on politics, but I like to come from a more educated viewpoint before I do that. But just in general, what I'd like to see, based on the last mayor we had, there was a lot of programming that was supported, like One Summer Chicago, uh, other violence coalitions and initiatives and things. But what I saw, what I feel wasn't done correctly was, it's one thing to, provide a job for youth, but this One Summer Chicago program, as many kids are enrolled and were able to get paid and stay out of trouble through that summer program, it's not a holistic approach. There's a few organizations that are involved that provide additional resources, but it doesn't seem to involve enough. There's social emotional learning, there's life skills, there's access to new opportunities and education and family resources. And what these programs have been doing is working, on the individual basis of these youth, but not including their families, providing a job, but not helping them keep it. Giving them access to an opportunity, but they can't stay with it because they have maybe more need for a stable housing that's secure and safe, where they can develop as a young person, than just be provided an opportunity that they can't keep up with. The demands of their life and the expectations and obligations that these young kids have, they need more. And I would like to see programs and funding come into the city that promote a more holistic approach, because our last mayor was able to gather a lot of cool metrics and data, but it was short termed, and when the resource is taken away, young people go back to what they know. And when I'm working with kids in the city, things are, during the school hours, things are undone when they leave school or over the weekend, because you have to put up your defenses, you have to live, have to put on those masks, and it's not safe to keep them off and learn and grow, right? So I would like to see more resources focused, and something I see in Chicago. Chicago is very well known for its segregation, and it's the history of that, and just how community by community, it's very it's isolating, and people are cut off from what's happening in the town over, whether it's gangs or what have you that separates it. But I think the big thing is there's lack of collaboration. There's a lack of collaboration through nonprofits. There's a lack of collaboration through one alderman to the next. It seems to be more cutthroat and more of a competition. And I would like to have a leader like Lightfoot come in and have communities and collaborations and organizations work together, because everyone's fighting for the same grant, and there's not enough incentive for people to work together. So these communities that have an abundance of resources still have a huge issue with violence and lack of resources. Even though all the resources are at their disposal, no one's coming together. No one is sharing ideas and stuff, because everyone feels like they can't trust the next person, maybe. Or maybe there's a history of organizations using one another to collect metrics and get access to new grants, and then they forget that they were quote unquote partners in the whole thing. So I would like to see a mayor that kind of unifies people in that way and incentivizes, nonprofits to access money based on, working together.
Right. Thank you, Dan. So, let's finish off. You're in Auburn Gresham now. What's next for Dan?
What's next for me? I've had a passion project I've been working on, and basically what I'd like to do in the next few years is start my own organization, my own foundation, and it'll consist of all the things that I think worked well that I've experienced over the years and I've heard my youth say they need and their families say they need. So I would like to have a place where you can be a part of a close-knit community and receive, workforce development and access to jobs, life skills, social skills, social emotional learning, housing, mental health services, access to the trades. I did some work at a garage that was a nonprofit that taught kids how to do mechanics, and then would connect them to their hiring partners that were in the automotive field or schools that taught that more. And there's a lack of access to trades. Most kids are told that they have to go to college to be successful. And from my own experience, my education, my experiences, and the people I encountered along the way, yes, they led me to where I am now. But as far as credentials and education, I can do most of what I do now without all those fancy degrees and stuff, and that monumental debt that I, acquired along the way that I'm just barely picking at the interest, right? So there's ways to be successful with a year or two dedicated to a trade, with ongoing trainings and stuff, and that's something that a lot of youth aren't given access to. So that's what's next for me. I just started a new job that is, it's really nice. It's basically it's a startup. It's an app, and the whole thing is kind of what I've been talking about. Their vision, their mission, their values is all about bringing people together to support one another and give access, in a way that it utilizes the spirit of volunteerism to bring awareness to a cause or charity while directing donations to your organization of choice through your service, right? So it's like a task service, type of thing, but the mission is bringing people together. It's rehumanizing people. It's encouraging people to share ideas, share services, and give access to resources while campaigning and fundraising for worthwhile causes and genuine collaborations. And the app is called Task Friend, and it's in the beginning stages is really great, but it suits me because it's going to allow me to build relationships and bring resources to nonprofits across the city, and that's what I like doing. I like the human to human contact, and that's it's something that's just motivating me more to kind of stay on my path to start something myself. And I've worked with a handful of great organizations in Chicago, and but I feel like with the type of person I am, things aren't going to be done the way I feel they need to be done unless I'm the guy making it happen. Right? There's amazing organizations that I'd love to be a part of right now, and everyone does something really well. But I would like to be a part of something that does many things very well. That holistic approach is what I'm about.
So the app is Task First. That's the name of the app.
Task Friend.
Task Friend. Is that on iPhone, Android?
Yes.
Okay. I think Task Friend on
Task Friend.
on your Android and your iPhone. Go to the Play Store. Go to the App Store.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you so much for that, Dan. So now we're gonna transition to what I call always people's choice, but Dan gave me the choice for the people today. So I'm going to what I want to talk about is just a time where you were you came at a crossroads in your life, and then what you did to just make a choice about what you want to be in life. I can start it off by talking about a choice I made. It was actually what we're coming up on like the 4-year anniversary of when I did it. I walked into my job and just quit because I just I had been there for about 4 years, and it was just I didn't like my boss, and I just didn't want to be there anymore. So I spent a good 6 months. I'm trying to think. It was about 5 months unemployed. Then I got another job, and I still didn't know what I was going to do. I was lucky I was making more money, but still I didn't know what I was going to do. And then one day I was driving down the road, and I heard Solange's song "Cranes in the Sky," and I had to pull over, and I cried, and that was the first time I cried in about 5 years. Like I haven't been to funerals in that time, and I didn't cry
Yeah.
because I just didn't have the emotion in me. And then that's when I cried, and that's when I knew, you know, I had to stop, feeling sorry for myself and stop, you know, I had to stop, thinking that I couldn't do something and know that I could do something. And that's when I went back to school. That's when I got my master's. That's when I applied for my PhD program. And that's why I'm talking to you right now, because I let all that. So there was a lot of negative energy that I had in me, and I decided just to let it go and just say, I don't want to be negative. I want to be positive. And I decided to be positive. I made that choice for myself. So with all that rambling aside, was there any
Even.
time in your life where you felt like, okay, what is going on right now is not working, and I need to take control of my life?
Yeah, I'll tell two quick stories because there's two moments in my life. One was 10 years ago, and it was towards the end of my undergrad. I've been involved in all that volunteering and the caregiver job and high school football coach, and I had a couple part-time jobs and full-time student. So there's all this stuff happening. I don't know how, I did it, or, people like, me went through school with all that stuff happening. But, it was the beginning of my last trimester, and I got like deathly ill. I ended up going to bed with a headache on a Tuesday, and I was in intensive care by Sunday. My body was shutting down. I was jaundiced. All my organs were inflamed. I had excruciating pain. I was packed in blankets, packed in ice because my temperature wasn't regulated. My white blood cells kind of took a vacation. My immune system was gone. And doctors didn't know what to do with me. I was quarantined. I fit symptoms of a lot of crazy illnesses. And after so many weeks in the hospital, I ended up recovering. After the third day being there, they said people don't recover from these numbers. So here I am, 22 and a half or so years old, expecting I'm going to die. So when I walked out of there, I had a new sense of life. Everything tasted better, smelled better, you know, um, and I had this open heart and mind to the world and things around me. And that's when I soon after, as 5 months later, I started my career. So I had this newfound drive to make an impact on the world and use use my experience and that motivation to make an impact, right? And then the other thing that happened was, about 6, 7 months ago, I was coming off of a really great role with an organization I thought was going to be my main thing. And upon looking under the surface, I saw the ugliness of what it really was. But I was working for the last couple of years, 7 days a week. I was working about 80 hours a week, and everything that I had going on in my life, personal, all the things I've ignored, all the things I needed to do for myself and relationships in my life, were just put on the back burner. And I told myself that I was doing all these things for a good reason, and I was. But, instead of self-care, I was staying up late on the phone with a kid or meeting up, someone to help them get a venture pass or, so they were, good things that I was doing, but I didn't understand what self-care was. And my identity and my purpose was all wrapped up in youth work. So when that abruptly ended back in September for me, I was kind of lost. And I've been fighting depression for most of my life, and knowing that I had depression probably following that illness and never really seeking out help. And I'm really good at telling people what they could do for themselves or better things for themselves, but not taking my own advice. And a lot of people in service are at fault for that. And I had to lose everything, all the jobs and new life I had lined up all abruptly ended. Everything fell through, and my depression overtook me, and I wasn't able to function. I was in bed for months. I put on a show to, go to the family Christmas or whatever, and but I was lost, and I had the love of an amazing person in my life that taught me how to love myself. And I had some really great human beings in my life that were there for me. But ultimately, it was my choice, right? I chose to hide. My phone was cut off, so I didn't have access to people, or people didn't have access to me. I didn't tell anybody that I needed help, and that's what would have brought me out of things sooner. And I had to sit with that and learn on my own terms how to love myself and how to accept help. Be vulnerable, especially when I've been so used to wearing a certain mask or have a certain image that I was afraid to lose. And I had so much wrapped in what other people thought of me, being the person that had their shit together, have, all these things going for them. And that's usually what people say, when you have a friend that seems like everything's going right, they're probably the one that needs the hug the most. And that was so true. And so it was it was the most difficult time of my life, because it was an emotional thing, it was a mental thing that I had to overcome to accept the love and care and support of another human being, to be completely vulnerable, to not be able to provide for myself and rebuild myself, really. So I got into therapy end of last year in December, and that was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me. My therapist, I'll drop his name, Marcellus, man, he halfway through my first session with him, I wanted to stop, because I didn't want to be his client. I wanted to be this guy's friend. I wanted to go out for a drink with the guy and have a cigar. Just an amazing, down-to-earth human being, and his approach to everything was amazing. And to be my first session, my first therapist I ever been to have that type of connection is a million, I think. And I was blessed for that. And I did a lot of research on him though, because that was one way to avoid having to go to therapy, was all this research and stuff that I was doing. It just worked out. You know, his office is in Hyde Park, and he's up in off of the Lawrence Red Line stop also. And so he's just been a big person in my life that's helping me redefine who I am. And in that process, I've had to reintroduce myself to people, my own family. You know, one by one, I'm meeting up with my siblings, just sharing what I have going on in my life, because the way I was brought up and the things I value and honor today are a little bit different. And there's a lot of guilt and shame around that, but I need to be okay with who I am, you know, and just and that's been a great journey. And it's been a good handful of months now where I've been in a good mindset and getting back out there, and I was hitting, you know, the job applications and everything, and I fell into what I am doing today. So those were the two moments. You know, I had to you know, almost lose my life physically, and then you know, I had that emotional kind of breakdown to rebuild myself. So it was a blessing in disguise, because I would never have taken care of myself if I hadn't lost everything. You know, I would have just kept on working 10, 12-hour days every day. So.
Thank you so much for that, Dan. I hope that anybody who listens to this, I hope these stories inspire you. And if you need to get help, just get help. It's no shame in it. I get help. Dan's talked about how he got help. Everybody needs help. We're all human. So please go out there. If you need help, get it. Ask anybody. Hey, you can message me once I post this on SoundCloud, and I might not be able to help you, but I can find someone who can.
Same here.
Yeah. So as always, when I end this show, I always ask my guests, can you give me the last book you read, the last movie you watched, and the last song you listened to?
Okay, yeah. So the last book that I read is, you know, I gotta look at the title. It's let me.
All right. We were waiting on Dan to go grab the book, and he'll give us the title.
Yeah, you put me on the spot with this. It's Exit West by Mohsin Hamid. That's kind of a love story and amidst war and everything.
Mhm.
So kind of a heavy read, but I'm a hopeless romantic, and I'm getting into Pedagogy of the Oppressed right now. So that's the book I'm currently on.
I'm reading that book too. I'm trying to prepare for my class in the fall.
Yeah, I hope you read this class. That was a good class, man.
Yeah.
The last song I listened to was Nas, Just a Moment.
Well,
Uh,
what made you think that's in our first year of college?
and then what was it? The last movie I watched?
Yeah.
I attempted a movie last night, was just awful. The last full movie I watched, I watched Robin Hood, the new one with Jamie Foxx.
Oh, is that good?
It was awful.
It was awful. I can skip that.
I don't recommend, you know, spending the 2 hours on it.
Yeah. Hey, all right. So thank you, Dan, for joining me this week.
Thanks for having me, man.
And as always, to my listeners, you can catch this on SoundCloud. And lucky that my podcast has been accepted by Apple Podcasts, so you can catch it on iTunes, Apple, wherever they do their podcast now. And as always, be good and drink your water. Peace.